So the first thing we're going to be talking about today is something that I think is interesting, which is we're going to be talking about the Halo TV show, and we're going to be talking about Paramount's role in the Halo TV show. Now, it's no secret that I used to work at Paramount Studios. I was there for a couple years as a lowly page, but I was actually on the lot. I got exposed to a lot of stuff while I was there, because when you work on a studio lot, you just kind of pick things up as it goes along. And one of the big things today is that the Halo series is coming. They dropped the trailer this week, and I gotta admit, the trailer looks pretty badass. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check it out, but the trailer, it's something right from the games. It just looks amazing. But the thing is that a lot of people are kind of worried that the Halo show is going to be woke, and Master Chief is going to be like a secondary character, and it's going to be focused on this little girl that was in the trailer and all that stuff. But we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about actual signs that the show might be in trouble, which is the fact that it's getting a third showrunner for a potential season 2. Now, for those of you out there who don't know what a showrunner is basically the creative force behind the show. They're usually the head writer, or they're in charge of the writer's room. They're the ones who make all the final decisions. On a movie, you usually have the director in that position, but on a TV show that oversees multiple episodes and multiple productions at the same time, it's usually a showrunner. And so we actually had one showrunner in the initial version of Halo, the TV series, who quit before anything happened. So Halo has been in development hell for 8 to 10 years. And originally it was going to be a movie directed by Neil Blomkamp, and it was going to be produced by Microsoft. And through a variety of methods, it eventually wound up at Showtime. It was going to be a Showtime original series. And once the Viacom merger happened with CBS and Paramount, they switched that from a Showtime thing to a Paramount Plus thing, because Paramount needs more, they call them pillar shows, shows that kind of prop up the streaming service. And the only thing they have right now is Star Trek, right? And Star Trek sucks. So they're looking for another kind of marquee show to bring people into the network. And so they shifted Halo from Showtime to Paramount. And when it was at Showtime, it was with a showrunner who didn't have a whole lot of experience. He'd done a series called Awake, but he left. And then they brought in a different showrunner named Stephen Kane, who did The Last Ship and a couple other really good TV shows. And so he did the season 1. But after season 1, he was like, you know what? I spent 2 years in Bucharest shooting this thing. I want to get back to my family. I got no interest in going on with another season of Halo. And so they're talking about bringing in a third showrunner, even though a season 2 isn't officially announced yet. It's pretty much guaranteed to happen. So the guy that they're bringing in is named David Weiner, and he is the showrunner for Fear the Walking Dead and Brave New World, which was a Peacock original. And so they're bringing him in to take over. And whenever you have this much of a churn with showrunners, it's usually a bad sign, because the showrunner is responsible for kind of the overall feel and creative direction of a TV show. And so when you're bringing in new people, they usually want to change things, or they have a different kind of mentality. So it creates uneven stuff. Sometimes if the show's bad and you bring in a better showrunner, it gets better. If the show's good and you bring in a crappy showrunner, it gets worse. So we haven't even seen what Halo is going to amount to yet. And they're already bringing in a new showrunner, so it's going to be rough. And in addition to this, we also have news that Sony has bought Bungie, which was the original studio that developed Halo. And it looks like Sony is going to be trying to compete with Paramount by doing Destiny content. Destiny is Bungie's big marquee game right now. And so Sony now owns that property. And we could be seeing a Destiny versus Halo situation developing in the streaming wars. But in addition to that, I also want to point out Paramount's kind of inherent, incompetence, I guess you'd say, which is that Yellowstone, one of the biggest TV series currently going on, people are just addicted to this thing. They love it. It's basically Sons of Anarchy, but with cowboys. It's one of the biggest ratings winners on TV right now. People are devouring it on Peacock, which is where it's streaming, but it's a Paramount TV show, and Paramount sold the streaming rights to Peacock before the Viacom merger happened. And so now like their biggest show on TV is something that they can't bring to Paramount Plus because they were too short-sighted to see that selling it off would be a detriment to their primary streaming service. So I just thought it was interesting that the Paramount Plus chief was kind of just like, yeah, we screwed up, and we're just going to have to like write it out until the rights revert back to us. And Peacock, which just lost close to $2 billion with their launch, now has this to kind of prop it up while it kind of gets back on its feet. So that was a lot of stuff to talk about, but I want to hear what you guys have to think about this. Mr. Reagan, what is your opinion of this switch up with the showrunner and Paramount's just kind of seemingly general incompetence with its marquee shows?
Well, you don't really lose a showrunner unless one of two things is happening. Either the show's going in a terrible direction. Speaking of which, my cat is going into a terrible direction, and which is right in front of the camera. What are you doing, buddy? you see I'm on a stream here, pal.
He's the star of the show.
He wants to be on the show. All right, get out.
Leave him on screen. The internet loves cats.
That's true. They love cats. That's what YouTube was made for, right?
We'll see our ratings go up.
That's really a bad spot. Come on, let's move. Okay, there you go. Okay. Either the showrunner was doing a terrible job and the producers are unhappy with what was accomplished in season 1, and they thought, okay, we got to get rid of this guy and get somebody else. Or there is some kind of dominance from the producers that the showrunner just can't tolerate. Because the showrunner is an awesome job. You want to be a showrunner. If you're a writer in Hollywood for TV, you want to be the showrunner. The showrunner decides what gets on the air. I mean, he's in control of everything. So it's a very, very important job. It's a great job. You have a lot of creative freedom, unless you have very domineering producers that demand certain things of you, and that can be very frustrating. I've worked in Hollywood. I've known showrunners, and they can get really frustrated by the amount of control that the producers exert over them, and so they can quit for that reason, or the show could just be doing poorly. So it's potentially one of those two things. If the executive producers are exerting a lot of control over the show, maybe they're trying to make it more. The word woke is used probably too often, but I think it's used too often because it's too often the case that shows are woke. And you have situations now in Hollywood, I think, where you have these competing interests. You have this with Disney. I think you have this with Paramount Plus now. You have this with Sony, where they're starting to wake up and realize that a lot of their very hard left shows are bombing. And a lot of their more conservative shows, either in terms of the message of the show or in terms of just the style of the show, are doing really, really well. I mean, you look at Yellowstone. I would actually say Yellowstone is, in terms of the messages, is actually a pretty left-wing show. I don't actually watch the show, but I've read about the show a lot, and I've looked at some stuff. I've seen one episode, and it does seem to have some leftist messaging. But it's a cowboy show. You're going to get, all the people in America that are watching television and are inundated with this, far left-wing propaganda day after day, but they want to just watch something entertaining. They're going to get entertainment where they can get it. And Yellowstone, being a cowboy show, being a bit of fun, I consider it kind of like more like a soap opera set on a ranch. It's like Game of Thrones. I thought Game of Thrones is like a soap opera set in a fantasy version of the Middle Ages. Yellowstone is a cowboy soap opera. I mean, there's, turns out it's your brother, dun dun dun. It's all that kind of crap all the time. Not the best writing, if you're talking about like sophisticated writing, but definitely crowd pleaser stuff. I mean, even with Star Wars, you've got no, I am your father, dun dun dun. Occasionally you have
melodrama,
these melodramatic things, which is actually really good to do maybe once or twice in a movie or a TV show. You don't want to have it like episode by episode by episode, then it becomes a soap opera. But that's kind of stuff, if you mask it well enough as a medieval fantasy or as a cowboy show, it can actually work pretty well. And so I feel like Yellowstone has done that. But Hollywood is having a really hard time right now just trying to reconcile this reality, with what they want to be true, right? They want it to be true that the stuff that they think is going to do well will do well. And the stuff that, if we take a franchise and we take out the young squire, we take out the young man, and we just ham-fisted shove in, that sounds kind of vulgar, but a young girl, then it's going to be successful, right? Everybody's going to love it.
Yeah,
the
everyone
problem
loves
is
fisting. It's
huh?
true. Everyone loves fisting. It's very true.
Yeah, that was probably not the best choice of words,
tortured metaphor there. But I want to get to Book here. Book, what do you think of is Paramount kind of blowing this again with Halo? Do you think that the turnover in showrunners is going to affect the series? What's your take?
Well, look, everything Mr. Reagan said about the situations that cause a turnover in showrunners is spot on. And to me, it's just indicative of how difficult it is to adapt video game properties over to television or movie, right? Like, it's not shocking to me at all that they're having difficulty taking Halo, which is like, yeah, it's got a cool character, cool premise, cool aesthetics, all of that stuff. But ultimately, we care about it because the gameplay was good. It was always like, you remember the first Halo, the graphics were so smooth. The gameplay was so strong. It was one of the first opportunities that let you play FPS, online against people. That's what created the emotional attachment to those franchises, to that franchise, not necessarily anything particularly about the character of Master Chief or the setting, albeit those are cool. So that doesn't surprise me at all. The other thing that stuck out to me, Matt, when I was looking at this cluster of stories you shared with us, was when I looked at the Yellowstone one, and they're commenting about how when they made the deal to sell the show off to Peacock, Paramount Plus didn't exist, which was true. But it did exist?
CBS
All Access. Right, which goes back to what you and I talked about on this stream last week. The dangers of launching a streaming service without a clear reason to do it other than we got to launch a streaming service. Like, CBS All Access from the jump felt like a solution in search of a problem. That's really the way it felt to me as somebody who subscribed right away because I wanted to check out the new Star Trek show. And it's remarkable how that kind of a bad decision can haunt you for years and years and years. And I really feel like in multiple ways, the terrible misguided rollout of CBS All Access has just been the gift that keeps on giving for Paramount.
Yeah, what's funny about CBS All Access, and this goes back to my assertion that Paramount is run by complete idiots, was that CBS All Access was Les Moonves' baby. He was the one who was like spearheading that push. And this was back when the two studios were bifurcated, right? You had CBS and then you had Paramount. And they were two distinct companies under the same umbrella, but they operated independently of one another. And that was because of Sumner Redstone's greed and wanting to have like the stock price manipulated way back when. And that created a host of problems for properties like Star Trek, where CBS had the TV rights to Star Trek and Paramount had the movie rights. And so like they were constantly battling with one another over the Star Trek franchise, which was one of the reasons we got such crappy Trek over the course of that, that split. And now that the mergers are back together, CBS All Access has been transitioned over into Paramount Plus, and it has, access to all the Paramount library and stuff like that. And so like there's a lot of stuff that they're now doing that they couldn't do before with CBS All Access. But the idea that they have this ratings behemoth with Yellowstone and they can't even use it on their own streaming service just shows like how short-sighted they are. And getting back to like the wokeness factor on this, like Yellowstone kind of like, I wouldn't even call it left-wing. They kind of do both sides of the road, but it's not an inherently political show. It doesn't kind of like put its politics or its messaging up front. It's about the characters and the drama that the characters are going through, which is what a good TV show should be about. And you contrast that with what we've gotten on the Star Trek end of things, where it's very preachy and very like, propagandistic and stuff like that. And almost puts the stories behind that, in terms of like the messaging first, story second. And that's one of the reasons why Discovery has been so bad. It was more about the virtue signaling than it was about telling a good Star Trek story. And also, I wanted to highlight this from Jedi of Chicago. He said that the showrunner said that basically having to spend 2 of the last 3 years away from his family was the main reason for leaving. And this is true. Like, basically, the Halo show shot in Budapest, and he had to spend 2 years out there, especially during the COVID lockdowns, working on the production of the show. And he was just like, I don't like being away from my family this long, so I don't want to do this show again.
That said, people lie.
This is very true. This is very true. But that is his reason for leaving. But the fact is that no matter how you spin it, this guy's leaving, and he's a good showrunner. Like, I've liked some of his other shows, and so like I'm worried that like we're gonna get maybe like a good first season of Halo, and then it dives off a cliff with this new show.
What else did he do? I'm not aware of.
All right, so basically the producer, the showrunner of this, Stephen Kane, he did a show called The Last Ship, which I really liked. It's kind of like a TNT show about a battleship that survives this like worldwide disaster, and they're kind of like the last bastion of hope in this world that's been like terrorized by a virus. And Adam Baldwin's in it, and it was just like,
I don't think I ever saw that, but sounds
yeah,
cool.
it was a pretty decent show, at least in the beginning. In later seasons, it got kind of bad, but I don't think. Let me just look up his IMDb here. I don't think that that he was a showrunner in the later seasons. I think he just started it, but.
Well, maybe he is leaving for his family. It is possible he's telling the truth. It's possible he's telling the truth. It's possible there's some kind of conflict between him and the producers with creative vision.
Oh, yeah. He was also the creator and showrunner on The Closer, which was one of the best cop shows on TNT for like a long time. Kira Sedgwick and, Kevin Bacon's wife. And he was also the co-executive producer on American Dad for a while. So, yeah.
Do you know what distinguishes all those other shows you just mentioned, Matt, from what this Halo show is going to be?
In every one of those video games first?
Yes. In every one of those examples, somebody got an idea for a story, and then they told the story. In this situation, they said, hey, here's a bunch of assets. Can you find a way to wrap a story around these so that we can capitalize on the brand recognition?
But it's not a bad idea. I mean, I've never played Halo, and I find... I do feel a little bit like I missed out on that pop culture phenomenon. So I do find the show attractive for that reason specifically. I would say for me, the trailer, if it weren't a Halo TV show, like, and based on that phenomenon, I don't know if I'd be all that interested in it. Like Matt said, the trailer does look good in terms of like the special effects are great, the cinematography is good, the acting looks good, everything looks fine. I didn't feel that there was a good hook. I feel like the hook is the fact that it's a Halo show.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's legions of Halo fans out there that have been dying for.
But because because that's your base audience, you need to do it right. You need to do it justice for them. If they're it's sort of like a Mandalorian. Your base audience is going to be those Star Trek fans that were disappointed in the sequels. So if Mandalorian was not done well, we wouldn't.
Star Wars fans.
What did I say?
Star Trek.
Oh, that's your fault.
Yes.
You were
talking about
I was wondering if you were going to let him slide.
No. Do not let me slide. That's a humiliating mistake. No, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I like Star Trek. I'm not as big of a fan of Star Trek, to be honest. But yeah, if you're a big Star Wars fan and Mandalorian wasn't good, I mean, that show would have died instantly. But the fact that it was so good, and I mean, I won't go into the new Boba Fett episode, but whew, I mean, thank God we have Star Wars back. That's all I can say.
Also, it's debatable how good Mandalorian is. But regardless of that.
Matt, I will fight you.
Hey, I'm just saying, it's kind of like if you've been fed shit all your life.
I know.
And then they give you something that's actually edible. But it's like Brussels
this cracker is delicious.
Yeah. Hey, here's a Brussels sprout I found on my shoe. Then you're like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever had. That's the Mandalorian for me, where it's like, after the sequels, like we were just so used to bad Star Trek that they gave us something mediocre, and we're like,
Star Wars, Matt.
I was testing you guys.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, likely story.
You know, that's bizarre. It's a weird that your brain does that sometimes. You hear Star Trek and you just repeat it, you know.
Matt, can I totally derail this conversation
Yes,
briefly?
go ahead.
Can you tell me, I'm just curious, do you know exactly when the term showrunner leaked into
That's
common
a good question.
discourse?
There's a lot of weird terms in film.
I don't remember hearing that term, prior to about, I want to say 10-ish years ago. And now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I assume that role existed, probably always, or at least for a long time. But when The Sopranos appeared on HBO, I don't ever remember hearing people say, was it David Chase? Was he the guy for Sopranos? I don't ever remember hearing him described as a showrunner. Now, maybe that's just me. Maybe I just wasn't reading Variety or whatever. When did this become a common thing where everyone knew what it was?
Well, I think it became more common once prestige TV started coming into vogue. So with the HBO shows and stuff like that, those were HBO was kind of like the first network to really give showrunners kind of like the run of things, where they were like the creative vision. But even going back to the original Star Trek with Gene Roddenberry, you had producers who were in charge, and they were the ones who were like calling the shots and hiring the people and kind of directing the show. So the showrunner has always been there, but just under a different name.
Because it's not an official name, right? There's no credit.
Well, the credit is executive producer.
Yeah. That
basically means showrunner. So they're the producer. They're the producer in charge of all the other producers.
But there's 10 executive producers sometimes. That doesn't that doesn't mean showrunner. But
exactly. If you see a guy with the one name and then executive producer, that's usually the showrunner. He's usually the last credit that you'll see before the directed by or whatever.
But there's also executive producers that finance the show.
Yeah.
And other things too.
And I think at least in terms of Star Trek Discovery, if you're a writer on the show for more than one episode, you get an executive producer credit or an associate producer credit. That's why you literally have 12 minutes of producer credits in the opening part of Star Trek Discovery.
Can I just add to that answer real quick? Because I would like to say, for those who don't work in Hollywood loves the business language, the industry language, right? The esoteric terms. If you need to go to the bathroom, you don't say I need to go to the bathroom. You say 10-1. And if they have clothes hangers that they use for a lot of stuff, and I think they call those C47s or something like that. Do you guys know? Something like that. They have all these bizarre terms for everything. It's weird. Best boy. You guys have all heard best boy. I'm sure.
Heard best boy. Yeah.
That's
been around for a while.
I believe.
Key grip. Yeah.
Or the electrician or something.
Well, key grip is one of the electricians.
Yeah.
They're one of the guys that just move around the lights. So.
Right. Yeah, they have their own. They have their whole their own dictionary of terms. So they it's a tendency of the Hollywood folk to do such.
They have their lingo.